The nurse's voice was flat when she finally called Angela's name. She hurried in, clutching Malik, only to hear the doctor's sharp intake of breath and see panic flood his eyes. In that instant, Angela knew they had waited too long. What happened next exposed a heartbreaking truth about how some lives are valued less than others. Black mother begged doctor to check her baby. Hours later, the truth was unforgivable. How? Could a place meant to save lives let bias decide who gets help first? Comment the name of your city if you're watching. Angela Jackson, a young black mother from Atlanta, cradled her 2-month-old son, Malik, in the pale blue hospital chair. It was supposed to be a routine checkup, but something felt off. His breathing was shallow, and his skin seemed pale. The pediatric ward buzzed with chatter, doctors in crisp coats moving swiftly past her. Angela's job as a cashier barely covered rent, but she never skipped Malik's appointments. She believed hospitals were safe places where all babies mattered. Yet every time she approached the nurse's desk, she noticed the way the staff's smiles tightened, how their eyes slid away. The waiting room clock ticked louder in her mind. 2 hours had passed, and no one had examined her baby. She shifted, Malik gently, her heart pounding, unaware that every minute of neglect was bringing her closer to a tragedy that would haunt the hospital forever. Angela's anxiety grew as Malik's breathing became more erratic. She stood up, approached the desk, and pleaded for a doctor. The nurse barely looked up, assuring her there were more urgent cases. But Angela could see the empty hallway beyond, could hear laughter coming from the break room. A white couple entered with their toddler, coughing mildly, and were taken in almost immediately. Angela's voice shook as she protested, but the nurse waved her off. She tried to stay calm, rocking Malik, whispering lullabies, but her son's tiny chest rose and fell with alarming speed. By the 3rd hour, panic replaced patience. She demanded to speak with the on-call pediatrician. A man in a lab coat finally appeared, his tone clipped and dismissive. "It's probably just a cold," he said without touching the child. Angela begged him to at least listen to Malik's lungs. He agreed reluctantly, but only after filling out paperwork first. While waiting, Angela overheard another nurse mutter, "Some people just exaggerate everything." It stung more than she expected. Her instincts screamed something was wrong. She dialed her sister, her voice cracking, telling her to come quickly. The air in the room felt heavier, the fluorescent lights harsher. When the doctor finally leaned over Malik, Angela saw his face shift, the first flicker of concern all day. He called for an oxygen mask, but by then Angela knew they had already lost precious, irreversible time. Malik's tiny body went limp in her arms before the oxygen could reach him. Alarms blared, nurses swarmed, and Angela was pushed back against the wall, her tears blurring the chaos. She watched as doctors worked frantically, shouting orders, their urgency now a cruel contrast to the hours they'd wasted. One nurse whispered, "Cardiac arrest." Angela's knees buckled. In that sterile, brightly lit room, she realized the unspoken truth. If her skin had been lighter, if her voice carried a different accent, her baby might have been seen the moment they walked in. Minutes later, a doctor approached. His words, numb and rehearsed, "We did everything we could." But Angela knew the truth. They had done everything, too late. Angela left the hospital with empty arms and a heart heavy with grief. Malik's clothes still smelled faintly of baby powder. She contacted an attorney determined to hold the hospital accountable, not just for her son, but for every child whose life was weighed against prejudice. The lawsuit revealed a disturbing pattern. Black patients in that ward waited, on average, twice as long to be seen. The findings made headlines, sparking protests outside the hospital. Angela spoke to reporters through her tears, telling Malik's story so no one could dismiss it as exaggeration. She turned her grief into purpose, partnering with advocacy groups to fight healthcare bias nationwide. Her voice, once ignored in a waiting room, now carried across the country. A warning and a call for change.